Lecture series. Seems like everyone who came out deserves extra credit, doesn't it? Especially former students who go back in the records and change them. Even though it seems like Andy's been here forever, he was a student of mine in 1982, from 82 to 84 when Bethany was a junior college. One of the first times I met him, it was probably an advisee dinner. I pulled out a box of comic books, an old vintage comic books, and he didn't leave until about midnight. He's like, this is really nice meeting you. Put the comic books back, and we lived pretty close at the time, though. We were right across the street on Marsh Street, right by the baseball field, so it wasn't too far for him to go home. After Bethany, he went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and finished with a studio art degree. And in 1987, one of the art professors here needed a sabbatical replacement, so he was hired to teach at Bethany in 1987 for a semester. Really. He was well paid for the whole semester. After that, he went on to graduate school at the Savannah College of Art and Design. He married one of the students that he met at Bethany. And then he came back to Bethany in 1991. We needed someone to teach ceramics. We needed someone to work in publications and theater, technical theater, and jazz band. He used to do a thing with the Jazz Cats. It was an awesome band. Then he left again and went to Texas to work as a commercial artist. Came back 3 years later, and he's been here ever since. Please welcome Andrew Overn.
Can you hear me okay? Landon? Good. I have to say first, it's a bit odd because this is not the type of work you ordinarily see in an exhibition like this. And I don't want to introduce it with too many caveats, but virtually all the work you see on this side, it's not really art that's meant to be exhibited at all. These are all images. They're still images from a future and ongoing project that will ultimately be a music video for the Divers. And so if they look a little strange, like there's something missing, they're not images at all. They're scenery. And so it's a little bit weird to take works in progress. I've been working on this. Well, I'll explain it here in a minute. And what you see over here on this wall, these are things that I've done as a freelance designer over the last year and a half. And so not the type of thing you would ordinarily exhibit, but when you get a sabbatical at Bethany, which are really good things, this is sort of the obligation afterwards that you should have a show. And so I'm not ordinarily the type of artist that works in a gallery and produces work for a show like this, but well, that's where it comes from. And if you don't like it, you could talk to Bill. So that's what the show is in a nutshell. The title of the show has to do with a couple of things. The first, it's funny being in a situation like this because I don't often consider myself as an artist really. I'm more of an arts educator. And when you have a job like mine, you don't get a lot of free time. And so the first sort of concept that comes to play in the title is it's on sabbaticals. You get all the time in the world. You can work on things and it's great. And then the semester starts and you can see it arrive. You can see it way in the distance like a tsunami that's sort of coming at you. And then the tsunami hits and you're done. I don't know how Bill gets any work done, but he manages somehow. I suppose the Renaissance is much the same way it was last year and the year before. So Because I teach in web design, and the world of web design, if you know anything about it, it's different now than it was 2 weeks ago, and the day before then, it's something that new happened. So it's really great if you're Mike Knepprath, who's young and interested. But when you've been here 20 years like I have, which I just found out last week, that's kind of a hit in the gut. It's hard to drum up the energy every time, oh, the latest incarnation of whatever software, programming language, it just gets, never mind. So that's Feast or Famine. The other thing, Feast or Famine, I was thinking about what to talk about, and I remembered that there was a time years ago that I was going to be a psychologist. And one of the things that sort of, I learned quickly after a few graduate level classes at the University of Minnesota that psychology, like any human area of activity that is not enlightened by biblical wisdom, gets in trouble really quickly. And I realized pretty soon that psychology was not something that I wanted to do. But it kind of stuck with me a little bit, and so I did some, when I was in graduate school, I even wrote my master's thesis on creative motivation and the reason why some people are creative and other people are less so. And you could come up into my office and read it sometime if you need help sleeping. But so I thought I'd share a little bit of what I found in there, because I thought it's still pretty interesting, because you walk around and some of your classmates have notebooks full of doodles, and some don't. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Why do some do that? Why is that something people have this impulse to do, and why others don't? And so I did some research, and I discussed in my thesis what philosophers had to say about it, artists and psychologists, and I thought it was interesting enough. I thought I'd share it a little bit with you. So the first philosophers, by and large, over the years, have looked on artists as in a more or less positive light. David Hume, a well-known philosopher, artists have deeper and more powerful feelings that regular people, I should say, don't have. Proofread. Immanuel Kant said, artists are able to glimpse a spiritual level of reality that all you other, non-art people just can't seem to see. Aldous Huxley, on the other hand, said the artist can see things that others can only see through the use of mescaline, which I found very interesting. So far, we've decided that artists have some sort of intuition, some sixth sense, or else they're drug addicts. This is what philosophers think. Artists, on the other hand, depending on who you talk to, if they are an artist, they somehow seem to have a very, maybe more positive view of how artists should be perceived. Kandinsky said, in very dramatic language, scorned and hated, he, the artist, pulls humanity after him in a heavy chariot, ever upwards and forwards. It's like your artist in the crowd, it's your duty. This isn't something you do, it's not something you like to do. Nobody cares about what you like to do. This is your duty. You must perform for the masses. Robert Henry, I discovered, he thought artists have to give like the bird must sing. We can't help it, we artists. We simply, anyway. You get the idea. Psychologists, not surprisingly, had a slightly different view. Aristotle and Plato, of course, were not psychologists, but even back then they would discuss art and creativity in terms that are a little bit too similar, for my way of thinking, to mental illness. Aristotle and many others just decided that artists, they suffered from this condition called melancholia, which gave them, I guess, an emotional insight into the nature of the world that other people didn't have. Plato referred to creativity as the divine mania. This divine, that's nice, but then mania, not so much. Sigmund Freud was the best. He said, artists are motivated, A, by the quest for beautiful lovers. Sigmund Freud never obviously set foot in an art college in his life. So he also said that artists and creativity, it's an effort to compensate for other failings in other parts of their life, which I do not agree with. He did, though, say that artists exhibit a desire to return to the total control they had when they were infants, which is probably true. I do agree with that. Artists, generally speaking, are a little bit anal. At least they should be, if their work is going to be any good. Carl Jung described creativity as an impulse. People just have it. John Watson, he was a behaviorist. You psych majors, you know about that. He said creativity doesn't exist. It's simply a learned response, much like a rat in a maze eating cheese, or a dog that hears a bell and paints a painting or something. So this is a great quote that sort of debunks the crazy aspect, and this is what I prefer to believe. It's difficult to conceive of a mad Shakespeare. And I think if anybody who's tried to make art seriously and tried to work through the decision-making process that it involves, a crazy person wouldn't get very far. Even Van Gogh, everyone says that guy was even nuts. He had a mental illness like other people get. There's nothing having to do with art. What I finally decided then was that for those students in your classes, you see there's doodles all over their notebook. I describe it more like the insight I had, which may not be that deep an insight, but I think the metaphor works very well, is that making art like this it's like hunger. You have this urge to eat every once in a while. And someone who's creative staring at a blank sheet of paper, there's a compulsion to make marks on that page somehow. And like food, you can satisfy that impulse, but it always comes back again later. There's some people who are hungry all the time. And I think of, Bill, and I think of Jason Jasperson. I don't know if he's here tonight, but that's a guy, he can't get enough. He's, if art were food, he'd be morbidly obese. And for other people, I remember a guy in an undergraduate painting class I had who was really, really quite good. And I asked him, wow, you're going to major in art? Nah, not really. I mean, it was like, he was so good at it, but he didn't have that hunger. That impulse wasn't strong in him. So I describe that sort of desire, that initial desire to make marks as sort of a hunger. I don't know how else to explain it. But so as it gets to the show then finally, we've got, there's some art activities that are like eating a big meal, like Thanksgiving dinner, and that's what this is on this side of the wall. And then there are other things, you get hungry, and then you have a snack. And the snack, it doesn't take very long, you eat it quick, it's satisfying to a point, but it's not like having a real, this is like the Happy Meal versus the unhappy meal. So let me talk about the snacks for a while. And these things are, they're good for me. The pros in this kind of work, and this is just straight up graphic design for money. And on the one hand, the pros side of things, these are really, they're satisfying to a point. They kind of exist where art and culture and business merge. And that suits my temperament better than say, working with easel painting and gallery shows and things like that. But it's, so other good things about it, I suppose, well, if you've been in my art, I describe art as a continuum. People say, what is art? What isn't art? I say, well, it's a hard one to nail down because art exists on a continuum. On the left-hand side, we have art for art's sake. This is painting, sculpture, photography, the things that simply exist and they are their own reason for being. I'm going to paint because the painting is worthwhile. And if you like it, that's great. If you don't, it really doesn't matter. On the other end, we have shower curtain design, or sort of lumped in with the design you see on the carpet or these tiles on the floor. There's form, there's color, there's shape, there's texture, but there's no meaning. And then there's everything else in between. I would say that, laser beam on that? Oops. No, I'll just play. So where these things come in on the art spectrum, I'd say it's right about here. So there is a certain level of creativity creativity involved. There's a certain amount of meaning that must be there, but it's not just for its own sake. These are things that are made for a purpose, a cause, and that appeals to my sensibility, you know, and other people have different sensibilities. The plus side, they can actually help people. And these are people who have a business or they have something they're trying to get off the ground. This actually does help them. It establishes their business in a way, when it's really done well, design really adds to their credibility. And it makes them, you know, they're taken more seriously because they look like they're serious, because the public face of who they are is sophisticated. Or intentionally not, so, or humorous. This is on the back wall there. I put this in as kind of an interesting story. A former boss of mine, who's a writer, had published a book, and the book was about what happens to all the fairy tale characters after the story closes. And so Cinderella, for example, goes on to, because she says the prince lights out on her, and she's left to run the kingdom all by herself, and she doesn't know how to be a queen. So here she is reading business books, and she's at Panera trying to figure out how to do things. And this was the original version here, which is far more Cinderella-like. I think most people would recognize that as Cinderella. The problem with Disney is that they have a team of very high-powered lawyers. And they're very protective about their images and their copyright. So we had to sort of sacrifice a little bit of Cinderella's personhood to make her a redhead and give her a different hairstyle. But trust me, that's still her. I think, you know, I see things like this. The pros for these things are, I'm in a really good situation with these because I work with a friend of mine who runs a marketing firm. And what he does is he calls me up and says, hey, I've got a company, Prime Spec Services, they're home inspectors, and they want a logo that looks like them as a superhero inspecting a house. And I'm like, cool, I can do that. That's an evening's quasi-entertaining workload. And I can crank something like that out, and I get to draw things, I get to, you know, people are going to see it, I know that there's an audience that's going to see it, and all these things sort of reinforce that initial impulse to make images, because that makes it more fun. And you get paid for it, which artists aren't supposed to like money or talk about it, I guess, but I've got a kid in MVL. And that's no joke. So money helps, and so, you know, these things come along. He likes barbecue. There's a guy in Iowa who has his own trailer that's a barbecue. So he needs a T-shirt and a logo. So I can knock that out. I can draw this funny pig. It's fun to do, and it helps him out. And everybody, you know, it's like free enterprise. Everybody comes out ahead. So this is one of my favorite. This is probably my favorite here. Talk and Rock Radio. This is a radio station that they're launching in Alaska, and the format is a little different. It's half conservative talk radio and half classic rock. I'm not sure how they divide the time in the day, but so we got one guy. He's sort of like the Colbert Report guy, and then Steven Tyler's on the other half, but they're the same guy. And in the background, anybody know the background? Right, it's Eddie Van Halen's guitar, and I asked him if he knew that. Nobody knows who Eddie Van Halen is anymore. Anyway, it was a famous guitar at one point before you were born. So here's some of the drawbacks in something like this. You know, artists have this feeling like, well, they get used to it. They draw a picture in school, and their mom says, "That's really good, honey. You're really talented," and that feels good. So they draw some more, or their friends in school, "Wow, dude, you're good. You should keep doing that." And so they do it, so that feels good, they do that. And the problem with that is, eventually you run in, when you're dealing with this, you're dealing with real people who have their own agenda and their own issues. And it gets back to my food, my appetite metaphor. It's like a commercial artist is like a professional cook or a chef. And they're making these things for consumption by other people. Where an easel painter in a gallery, they're consuming it, they're making their own food and they're eating it. But for this, you're making food for other people, and no matter how good your soup is, they'll still send it back sometimes because they have a vested interest in, it's like if you're a chef and the customer comes back in the kitchen, starts throwing in spices, and you're like, do you mind? I'm making soup here. And they're like, no, this is my soup. You're going to add more salt because I'm paying your check tonight. And you have to say, fine, ruin the soup. It's your soup, and you got to eat it. You know? So these are some of the comments I've heard recently. The client likes red. And to which I say, so what? And they say, no, the client likes red. Okay, so you throw some red in there, and lo and behold, yeah, the client likes it. It's good. And you're like, so for those of you who are anticipating a career in commercial art where you're selling work to people, you're going to have to get used to the fact that they are part owners of whatever you make. And as long as they're paying the bills, you have to accommodate what they have to say. I like this one. Can you make the football cooler? And this is, how do you make a football cooler? You know, they're pretty cool already, aren't they? This is the heart of the problem, because you're dealing with people who have a mental picture of what they want, but they haven't studied art all their life, and they don't have the vocabulary to explain to you about hue, saturation, and brightness, or form and texture and whatever. They just say, make it cooler, and you're supposed to know what that means. And what? I don't get that. So there's pros and cons of anything, of all that kind of stuff. So we get to this part, and this is the main sabbatical work. This is the feast. This is something that, if we get back to the food metaphor again, this is you're creating Thanksgiving dinner for 50. And I was sitting there back in January, about this time last year, at the start of my sabbatical, and I started with a week in Florida to visit my folks, which was good. It's warm there. And then I came home, and my daughter likes this movie Brave, if you've heard of it. And on the special features of this movie Brave, there's this little short film called The Legend of Mordu. Have you seen this? No. And I watched this and I thought, check that out. You know, this is animated, but it's not like full Pixar animation. These are just pictures. And somebody painted up a whole bunch of pictures, and they move somewhat, and they kind of come in, and so it's animation, but it's not full-blown. I could do that. I could really do that. That looks like a fun thing. And I've got this great song that the Divers have got here on a CD, and we need a video. Who doesn't need a video? And so I could do that. The problem is I turned it off before these screens showed up. You know, if you count all the people that worked on this little short film that was like 4 minutes long, there's like 100 people. And it still took them a year to do it, probably. And so, in retrospect, this may not have been the brightest idea. But, well, so why do it? There's only, sometimes you're confronted by a situation, it's undeniable. There's a song that I wrote for my wife, and then, that's fine, but then we recorded it, and it's on a CD, and I sang the song. And now I get to make a video for the song in which all the images belong to me, and then I'm going to animate it and produce the sound behind it and do all these things. It's like, these opportunities don't come around, ever. And so, it's like, Lori runs marathons, and I can never understand why. But it's there, I guess. You know, runners run because it's what they do, and mountain climbers climb because it's their thing. And so this was like an opportunity too good to pass up. And in the meantime, I get to practice with digital painting, which now leads to a class that we're offering this semester. It gives me an excuse to learn After Effects, and it gives me an excuse to learn a whole bunch of stuff. So it fit the needs of the sabbatical, and it seemed like a suitably ambitious project. So I've been working on it since February of last year, and I'm about half done with the images. So come back, hopefully this fall, we're going to have a Divers video release party or something like that, and we'll have a premiere. That's the plan right now. So if you came here, if you saw the title of the show online or whatever, it said animations, well, sorry. So we've got some images here, and these all come, you know, the interesting thing, once again, you're drawing these things, and they take an ample amount of time to produce. And they're completely digital. This is made possible by some new equipment that the school has purchased, where it's a computer screen where you literally draw right on the screen. And that, combined with the right software, lets you experiment immediately with about 200 different media. You know, if you want to mix watercolor and charcoal, you could do that, and then throw in some airbrush and some whatever. So it's this great tool, and the opportunity shows up. So but all the images are 100% fabricated. And it's based on a true story, believe it or not. I don't know if I... So the story, well, no, you'll have to just come back and watch the video if you want to know the story. But, so it lets you experiment, and so that the images are, what would you say, idiosyncratic, or a little, they're personal in that they're what come out of me when I sit down to try to draw something like this. And I can't explain it any other way. There was a guy, Eric described him the other day as a perfect mixture between Norman Rockwell and Mad Magazine, which is, I thought, pretty insightful. But the cool thing is that all of these things are manipulatable. They're not like, if you drew this on a canvas or a sheet of paper, this would be awfully difficult. It would also awfully be difficult to take a picture of your son and convert him into a 90-year-old man. But the whole family gets in the act. I suppose the lead character is Lori, spoiler, but she might, and here's Ian again, he makes 2 appearances, but each consecutive part can get layered on one at a time, and then, because they're separate, you can move them separately. And that's, you know, the people in media arts will tell you that's 2.5D or whatever kind of animation. Not full-blown animation like Bugs Bunny, but it's as close as I'm going to get. So what does it look like when it's you know, I realize too, there's a reason why, you know, at the end of every movie that says every character in this film is fictional, and any relationship to anyone living or dead is purely coincidental. And there's a good reason for that, because after I finished that picture, I realized that looks just like a kid at Ian's school. Alex Shower, if you know Alex. He looks, it's like him. I don't know how that happened, but I just wanted to, the idea I had in my head was a slack-jawed redhead. And that's what came out. And I didn't know it would be Alex, but you know, that's not my fault. But these guys then, they can turn around. Or they can wiggle. And they can move. So you get an idea that it's not quite animation, but it's pretty close. So there's probably, you know, I've got, what, 6, 7, 8 images here. I've got probably another 20 at home. And not all of them are these are the most sort of central or strategically important images. There are lots of images that look like this, or like this. You know, you sit down and you think, today I'm going to draw a stack of dishes, and it's going to take me 10 hours. You start to think, why am I doing this again? I'm sure in Hollywood they've got like a junior man working on dishes. But what are you going to do? So eventually these will be dishes that stack up spontaneously. So just to show how some progress, that's what artists are supposed to do, right? Show how this is done. So it begins with me sitting in the Taylor Library back in February, and sitting down and just sort of sitting with my eyes closed and imagining how this should look, with playing the song in my head, rewinding, playing it again, rewinding, and seeing what images match where, and then taking lots of notes so I don't forget them now, because I'm not going to get to this till who knows when. So you get little thumbnail sketches that, you know, and notes, you know, the emotion it's supposed to show here, and then that leads to what I used to call thumbnails, but now I'm supposed to call storyboards, because that's cooler, right? And so you can see here's the one back, that's how it started, and this one is the So, it plays out over a number of pages. So the images come together like this. This is a screen capture of my monitor. And so it starts out just a real rough sketch. And the cool thing about being able to work digitally right on the screen is that the thumbnails, which used to have to be on separate paper, and then you try to have to transfer it over, you could just refine it and refine it and refine it again, like this. So the next sort of incarnation, and then you clean that up a little bit, and you start adding some color, and you got the Green Bay jacket. And then you add this little old lady on the side, and the kid with the Napoleon Dynamite afro. And does anybody recognize this guy? Bingo. And then you got the American Gothic people on the side. I mean, you're sitting there, you got to invent this whole space in your head. You got to invent all these people that are in this space, and your mind wanders. Well, American Gothic, what a funny joke that'll be. Nobody will ever see them. Well, everybody sees them. And then you get all the color in, and then you have other magic computer tools that help you with lighting and shading and stuff like that. And then that's in progress. So stay tuned. There's more coming later. That's all I have prepared. So does anybody have any questions or anything like that? Yes, please. Way in back, Ben.
Back to the logo thing, I'm assuming you do, I'm hoping you do, but just so everyone knows, you charge for every iteration of the logo that you do, correct? To an extent?
Like I said before, I'm in a very interesting and nice position to be for someone who wants to do sort of graphic design on the side. Because I have a relationship with this guy, I've got an hourly rate that I charge him, and it's his interest to make sure, and my interest too, that I don't have a lot of time for this, so it's my interest to be done quickly. It's in his best interest that I'm done quickly, because he's paying me by the hour. But in the meantime, I don't have to do any self-promotion. I don't ever have to actually meet the client in person. I don't have to travel anywhere. I just sit there and I get an email, he says that, and I say, okay, and I go make that and email it back to him, and I'm done. It's really convenient and good. So if the question is, do I get paid for every iteration? Yeah, but not by the version, more like by the time. Johnny, do you have a question?
Yeah, so back, thinking of that process and everything too, have you had situations where someone requests a logo or design of some sort, and the thing they're trying to get at, in your mind, you don't want your name associated with it. And, at what point do you find as an artist, and I think it's an important lesson for people who are doing things on a commission. One thing, you'll produce a piece of artwork, someone looks at it, likes it, buys it. Another thing, when they say, I want you to paint a mural on this wall for me, this is what I want in it, things. So, where is that line for you as an artist? And what advice can you give young artists in terms of working with a patron like that, when their idea of what they want is not something you necessarily want your name associated with?
There are definite sacrifices that you have to learn. In college, we like to think, well, if it's not ready, if it's not up to standard, I'm just going to keep working on it until it's ready and perfect. That's not possible all the time. You get a lot of practice in letting go. I know this isn't done. I know it's not perfect, but the time's up. You just got to be done, and you send it up. And sometimes that helps, because a lot of design decisions you fret over. What should I do here? And the clock determines, well, I just got to pick this and run, because there's no other choice. So that's one of the sacrifices you have to make. The sad part is, the risk is that you start to get numb to that. You start letting things go too early. And I guess there are times, for all the times where someone comes back and says, no, I don't like that, and see, that's the other thing. The way I teach and the way the students, I hope, are learning is that there's an objective. Well, when you're dealing with design, there's no wrong answer. There's about 500 right answers, and you're trying to find the rightest one. And if that's not a word, but I know that. And so you apply color, you make decisions for typeface, you do all these things that are decisions, and you make them from a position of hopefully knowledge and wisdom and insight into the nature of their business, who they are, how people will receive. You're always considering the audience, how are people going to react to it. But then they come back and they say, I like red. And how do you, it's a lesson you got to eat some crow sometimes. Because even though you know red is wrong for about 10 reasons, you just got to put red in because they're the boss. It's their thing ultimately. But for every difficult one, like our orthodontist friend, there's someone like Prime Spec or Extreme Gamers Party that take one look at it, dude, that's awesome. It's exactly what we want, and then love it, and you feel so good because, wow, that only took me this amount of time. They now they're going to use it. So it evens out in the end, I suppose. But that's definitely true. One of the lessons you can't really, well, maybe you do in school, but one of the lessons you have to learn is when to say when, because you just have to be done now, and sometimes it's not as good as you know it could be, and you still have to let it go. Yes?
Okay, pertaining to that though, can you address kind of the idea of having a personal style? Because if a client is looking for a type of work and they're looking for an artist to do a type of work, and they preview an artist's previous work to get a feeling for their style and kind of how they work, to build that relationship so that there's that open communication.
I think, so the question really is, maybe if I'm understanding, is it worth you producing this big extensive portfolio that shows your kind of work so that people who would like your kind of work would hire you to do your kind of work? And I think that's definitely true when you're dealing with major markets, design firms, or publishing houses where there's so much money at stake that they have to be right even before they start. And but I think the vast majority of design work is done because, hey, I need this thing on this thing, and my brother-in-law does this thing, and so why don't you guys do that thing? And then it gets done. And so I don't think in the world that I'm sort of working in here, I don't think people spend a lot of time worrying about style. I think, I did a T-shirt of another orthodontist, I don't know why, of a duck. He was trying to get on this Duck Dynasty craze, so it was Smile Dynasty, and I'm thinking, this, it's bad from the start, but you got to do it. And so I did this cartoon duck, look kind of like Daffy Duck, but not really, and he's flying. He's got this big giant grin with pearly white teeth that are perfectly straight. And you think, this is, they like it, but and this is it. This is the style of cartooning I've been doing since I was in 8th grade, and they like it. So good. But they're not going to call me and say, I'd really like to look at a portfolio and see if we connect, really. But I do know from experience, too, from earlier projects, that in publishing, I know a lot of students who think, I really want to do children's books. And, well, who doesn't? I mean, what a fun thing to do. They're fun images, kids see them, everyone loves it. The problem is, in publishing, they won't even look at your work unless you have an agent. And that agent markets that work actively to those publishing houses. They will only deal with people they know. And so they get how many thousands of unsolicited manuscripts and images all the time, and they just throw them right in the trash. It's a very difficult thing to get into. You almost have to approach it full time with a never say die attitude. If you have another job that distracts you, like teaching, you just can never muster the energy that would take to break into that market. Eric.
Now, when you say that you were drawing stuff from 8th grade, and I'm assuming that most of this group thinks that that's the Stone Age, and there were no computers, where's the interface between drawing and computer? Does the computer do your drawing for you? Do you draw? I mean, how much drawing is still needed to be able to work doing this kind of work that you're doing?
I read recently an article. It was a critical article about this notion that scientists sometimes have that the human brain is just like a computer, because the brain is a processing machine and it does things very efficiently, and we can develop software that makes the computer make decisions and artificial intelligence and all that crap. But the fact is, if a computer has no programming, it has no power, and nobody works with the computer, it just sits there. And So I don't know really how pervasive the idea, back in the old days, 15 years ago, there was, I think, this sort of built-in skepticism about anything done on a computer, because, well, the computer does all the work, right? And I look on my keyboard for that art button. I'm still looking, but the computer's not going to do anything you don't tell it to. And learning software, I mean, you can learn Illustrator, for example. All these are done in Adobe Illustrator. You can learn that from a book at Barnes & Noble without even buying the book. You can just sit there and sip coffee and learn. But that doesn't make you an artist any more than buying a really good set of brushes makes you a painter. So, I see the computer's a tool like a very expensive pencil. And the faster the pencil, the more efficient you could be, but it doesn't make your work better. The cool thing about these images, they're literally drawn on the computer. And that's the first time, that technology's been around for 15 years or 20 years or something like that, but it's now getting to the point where it's affordable enough where regular people like me can actually do that. And that makes, all it does is it gives, artists want to be in control at all times like a baby. And so, so what that does is you control every aspect of, you don't have to depend on somebody else who makes the paper. You don't have to depend on somebody else who is going to photograph your work later. You make it, you tweak the colors, you make it press ready, you send it to the printer, and they print it, and you've controlled everything except that last step. And that's, I think, what artists want. They want control. Will?
The spectrum of art is so broad that we talk about. Your work, it's very commercial art. We had the self-mutilation artists from Russia we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I guess like the intelligentsia and most art professors would probably consider some guy wrapping himself in barbed wire as high art, and your more commercialized art, like a superhero holding up a house, as low art in essence. Now, how would you respond to that? Do you embrace the moniker of I make low art and that's a good thing, or do you reject that and say my art is just as good?
I read another article recently that said on any given year, 1% of all easel paintings find a buyer. 1%. And that's a tough market. No, I think for me, and I think for most people, art depends on the type of work you like to do is what you will end up doing. And the type of work you like to do depends more on your temperament than it does on your skill or your connections. And so I remember a colleague in graduate school who had this very elaborate theory about art and how art tapped into the nature of existence, the true nature of existence, where everything is made up of vibrations. And art was going to set the world on the correct path, in tune, in synchronicity with these vibrations of the universe. And literally, this was her faith statement, really, that art was going to save the world. And I said, I thought that was very interesting. On the other hand, I have a real faith statement with a real religion. I don't need that. But for like anything, I think for some people, art becomes a form of idolatry. It's a substitute religion for some. And where art, and I'm not everybody. And people who really get into art, it's not like they're all thinking about art that way. But for some people, it becomes who they are instead of the thing they do. Wait, whose lecture is this? Come on. No, I think it's interesting because way at the other end of the spectrum, when I sort of panned to the people who design shower curtains, a shower curtain can give somebody a great deal of happiness, They're little yellow duckies or something. I love yellow duckies. You walk in, you wake up and you feel good because your bathroom looks so nice. And in a way, can you elevate shower curtains to a level of art that way? And I would say that one of the things artists are trying to do, and like the holy grail of art making, is if you're able to connect with the viewer on an emotional level, whether that's fear or horror or humor or just brightening their spirit. I think that's pretty good. And you can do that. We've all seen schmaltzy TV commercials where you're almost crying at the end after 15 seconds. It's like, what happened to me? But, so even something as lowbrow as advertising or marketing of TV shows or something like that can connect with people. And isn't that what Leonardo was trying to do? At least in part. So, I don't, I'm of an age where I don't care what people think anymore. That's the other thing too. I have younger colleagues who still have something to prove. They have this fire. I'm going to prove that I'm good at this, or I'm going to do that. I don't know. Whatever I think I'm going to prove, I go home and I am quickly brought back down to which is funny because I have one art critic in the world, and it doesn't matter what I ask. What do you think of this? And it's like, and she can't. This is great because she can't say anything in her defense. But that, you know, that gets. No, it's good because it, you know, if people get too full of themselves, nobody wants to talk to them anymore. Anything else? Oh, Landon.
Yeah, most of us on campus know you as a still image artist, and I was wondering if there's anything you've learned in your transition to more motion stuff that you'd like to share about motion media. Is there something in that transition that you've learned that would be beneficial for us as students?
Okay, well, I think, it's first worth noting that I've taught Flash for 15 years, and Flash is an animation platform, so it's not like it's just stuff still, but that's my story, I won't go there, but what's really cool is that motion is just a natural extension. It's like the next step along the way for any one of these pictures. I mean, yeah, they're interesting, but what if they moved? Or more importantly, what if there was sound involved? And I've seen enough things where you pair the right visual with the right piece of music or the right sound, and it becomes vastly more powerful. It impacts you at a far greater level than you might think. And if you doubt me, watch any of your favorite movies, your adventure movies, with the sound turned off. And you'll see how important music is, and sound effects and things like that. They're huge. They take what's sort of an interesting image and they make it literally come alive. And I think that's a really cool thing. So I don't see it as a change so much as just an extension, learning some new tools along the way. But that's what I'm looking forward to. That's going to be the fun part, to see these images start to move and start to, the timing, and then you start to work on some comedy and things like that. It's a next level of challenge that's what you look forward to. In the end, I talk about hunger and people get hungry to make art, and then you have a snack and it goes away. The danger, by the way, is that this can become junk food. If you make a quick buck or two by doing these things that you kind of like, but maybe they're not up to your, what you might want to do, you get used to junk food. You can get addicted to junk food, and it's maybe not best for your overall artistic, sensibility. But where was I going with this? In the end, though, I think at the very beginning, when someone's in kindergarten, they have an impulse to create something. But when you get to be an adult, you're affected by the same motivational things as anybody else, and art becomes motivated by. And I think the best source of motivation, if we go back to psychology again, is something I read in it's a business book, where people are motivated, people who are thinking, and motivated people, professional people, they're motivated by mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And when you're an adult and you're looking to motivate yourself as an artist, art fits the bill. Autonomy. I mean, art, you control everything. You're the autonomous agent of creation of this world that you've invented. Mastery. The fact that you can draw something and then look at it 2 weeks later and you like it. That really worked. I'm going to do that again. It's self-motivating that way. And purpose. People are motivated by lots of purposes. And if you get work that you enjoy, again, the purpose motivates itself. and it becomes a self-sustaining thing that you do. So I'm a very fortunate person to have a job like I have and be able to indulge in these kind of things. Art, there's a level of self-indulgence in art. I mean, I'm here talking about myself for an hour, and you all came, you know, it's freezing outside the house, this is self-indulgence, but everybody's motivated by that stuff, really. If there's cheese and crackers here if anybody wants some. No more questions? Okay, thanks. Thank you, everybody.